Hi, this is Gamer here to show you how to run Dolphin on the Mac for best results. I'll show you how to get the best speeds possible. You need to enable dual core and idle skipping. That's very important for speed, and the JIT recompiler near the bottom. Yeah, the JIT recompiler needs to be enabled as default. Nothing there in the interface at all. Audio, the DSP HLE emulation is default. It needs to be checked. The other options don't really need to be checked at all. Core audio, sample rate as high as you can get it. This stuff shouldn't be changed except for the device settings. You know, the default should be fine. OpenGL, 1920 x 1080 if you have a decent card. So you can lower or higher depending on how good your video card is. Stretch to window is the best option for aspect ratio. Enhancements, I do 1080p, which is 2x native and 3.0. You can lower it or higher it depending on like how good your video card is again. And then everything else like 16x for the filtering. Scale EFP copy should be checked. Hacks, you put a check for skip EFP access from CPU. Generally for most games, that gives you a really good speed boost. EFP copy should be set to texture. RAM is very slow, but is required for some games. But texture generally is the one you should be choosing. Accuracy set to fast generally. Frame buffer is disabled, and this stuff down here doesn't really matter at all. Just keep it at default generally. But advanced shouldn't really have anything checked in here except show AFB copy regions. That's pretty much the only one you want checked. Widescreen hack you can use for Gamecube games, but generally it's not recommended because you can have a lot of graphical problems by running that. And then of course audio, DSP HLE, as I showed earlier. Then your gamepad, if I use a Logitech dual gamepad, which is similar to a PlayStation gamepad. So yeah, you can go in here and do whatever you want for the settings. Like you configure, this is for the GameCube pad for GameCube games, so you just go in, click on whatever button you want to configure, and then you can save profiles for each individual game if you want, or you can just have the same buttons for every game. So yeah, it's pretty basic. Just click on, you know, whichever button you want to configure, and then hit the button on your gamepad or on your keyboard. But yeah, so I'm just hitting buttons on my gamepad, and it's showing what the button is representing. Wiimote, I use emulated Wiimote so I can use my gamepad still. You can use a real Wiimote if you really want to. There's the option for a real Wiimote. You need a sensor bar and Bluetooth enabled. Alright, so in here I have several different presets for different games. Some games work better with certain configurations. The GameCube one doesn't really, I usually use the same setup, but for this, some games just work better with different settings. So yeah, you can emulate like shaking or tilting of the Wiimote, but just hitting a button. So yeah, for example, like there's the tilt forward and backward. You can click on the forward one and then make it one of the buttons on the gamepad, so you don't actually do the motion. You just hit a button instead, which is what I prefer. Of course, there's different extensions you can use. Like I've used nunchuck usually as a default. Some games you have to disable that and change it back to none. So yeah, just hitting buttons on the gamepad to show what it's representing. But yeah, you can use an Xbox 360 gamepad, just plug that right in, and it works really good. I think there's a driver you have to install to use that. So yeah, this is really really good. Because I prefer to use a gamepad than a Wiimote for sure. It's just way more enjoyable. One reason why this emulator is superior to the Wii or GameCube. Well, more Wii. So yeah, these are the settings, and AA I usually put the none just because it gives me smooth gameplay, and I don't really notice a huge difference generally as long as I'm using at least 1080p. Yeah, so hacks, you want to set the texture as a default and skip EFB access from CPU for best speed results. Some games you have to disable skip EFB access from CPU, such as Mario Galaxy, or you will not be able to do certain things, like you can't grab the star bits or whatever they're called, unless you run over them, and there's certain things you can't grab. So one reason why that's one of the more demanding games is because you have to turn that option off, because generally with that option on, you get about 20% boost for most games. So yeah, here's my game list, the games that I have. Anybody has any questions about how games run properly, I can answer it if it's one of my games in the list. I don't have any other games for the system. Most games, you can just use the way the settings I showed you. Most games will run perfectly fine. Some games you have to make slight adjustments to make them work, which is a bit annoying, but I mean, that's just the way emulation is. It's just not every game's gonna work perfectly. So here I'm running Mario Galaxy. A very good game, one of the most demanding games for Dolphin. Of course, the benefit to running this game on Dolphin is the fact that you can get way better graphics than you would ever get on the Wii. So yeah, this is a really good emulator. So as you can see, it's smooth. Well, so far, of course, this is not very impactful. Well, not impactful. This is not a very demanding aspect of the game. But yeah, this is in 1080p on the computer, which is much better to look on the Wii. Much better. Which is another reason why this emulator is superior to the Wii. The fact that you can play pretty much every game at 1080p, and as long as your computer's good enough, it's smooth. Now my computer is it's an iMac, 2.5 gigahertz quad core with turbo boost. That's an i5 processor, and it runs for most games full speed, except for some of the more demanding Wii games, such as this one. I can only get about, generally it's around 90%. Sometimes it runs down to 75, 80% during certain parts of the game, but it's usually not for long. Of course, the music cuts out if you use the default sound setting. So if you really want to hear the music, you have to use a different sound plugin, which is the LLE one, which is very demanding. To use that plugin, your game will run about 20% slower generally, unless you have a really fast computer, and I don't know how fast, because this Mac's fairly fast as far as Macs go, so which is why I can play most games, but I have to use the default plugin, sound plugin for this, which means the music cuts out, but at least I can, play the game at a playable speed. As you can see, I am running ScreenFlow, so you won't see like the speeds as good as I actually get it, because ScreenFlow is slows it down a bit more, just like Fraps would. But generally, these games I show you, you'll be seeing them at very smooth frame rates for the most part. Even this game, which is one of the most demanding games on the Dolphin emulator. But as you can see, the game looks much better than it does on the Wii, and it's quite smooth. But yeah, so it's really nice looking. Like, it looks basically like you would see it on an Xbox 360, which is the way the Wii should have been, but isn't. But yeah, so the game looks good. There's no graphical problems or anything. It's and a little bit slower than it normally would. But it's a really good game. Plus, I like playing this game with the gamepad as opposed to the Wii mode. It's a lot